Hello and welcome back to the Green Workbench. Today we're starting a platform bed. So you won't need a box spring or a frame for your bed. Your mattress will just sit on top of this platform, and I'm making it out of plywood, 2x2s, 4x4s, and then it'll have a reclaimed barnwood facing. So this barnwood will face each side, and I'm going to go with a chevron pattern on the sides, and it'll also frame the top, so that if you do a cutaway piece, the mattress will sit right inside the barnwood frame, which will keep it from sliding. And I'm making it just about 6 inches longer than the mattress on each side. It gives a little spot to maybe sit, put on your shoes, and then the end is actually going to be a little bit longer than 6 inches, so it's easier to sit. Basic construction: 4x4 corners, and each side wall will be a 3/8" particle board with a 2x2 top and bottom, just like a joist. So my end piece, the plywood will be permanently attached with lag bolts, so each end piece will be a separate piece, and then my sides will carriage bolt on, so make it easy to take apart and put back together, but it's the same construction, 2x2 with particle board. For the top of the bed, it'll be two sheets cut 8x3, so it's 8 feet long by 3 feet wide, so that'll be two pieces that can just lay down, and then these joists that are supporting the top. And the joists, I haven't decided exactly where, if I'm going to need 4x4 or not. It may be here on the ends so that they stand up easily, or it may be in the middle, most likely on the ends. But also I will cut doors. So keeping the 2x2 frame, I'll cut out a door that can open. It'll be hinged, and then I'll have a sliding platform on drawer slides that can slide out so you can put storage, and then probably in two of them I'll just have it where it opens and there's no sliding platform, but you can just stick stuff inside, so that's giving us extra storage underneath the platform. The platform is only a foot high, so it's lower than a normal bed, but you can make it any height you want. So we'll get started by cutting the plywood to size for each of the sides and the top, so that we can start putting the frame together. Okay, I'm setting up my particle board to cut. So I'm going to cut my 1 foot sides and beams first. So I have this Craig jig that acts as a fence and a guide so that I can get perfectly straight. Just set it at 1 foot and run my circular saw, and I'll get a perfectly straight cut. Or you can run it through a table saw if you have a big enough table saw, or you can just draw the line and freehand it. This jig is very useful because you can get nice straight lines. So I'm going to go ahead and cut those, and then we'll move on from there. Because of the width of the saw blade, I can get 3 1-foot sections out of a piece of plywood, and the last one is 11 3/4 inches, so I'm losing a 1/4 inch on those three cuts. So I bought 4 pieces of plywood, so using 2 I now have 6 full 1-foot slats. I need at least 7, but on my last 2 pieces of plywood I'm just going to cut a foot off of each, and that'll give me my 3-foot top for the bed as well. It'll be about 1/8 of an inch off of 6 feet, but that's okay because of the way it's going to lay. It actually needs to be a little bit less than 3 feet with the barnwood trim. So that'll work out perfectly. So just make sure that you don't cut 2 1-foot pieces out of your 3rd piece of plywood, because then you'll be in trouble. So on those last 2 pieces, 1 slat each, and then I'll have my tops, and I'll have all my sides and all of my supports. My next step is to cut the 2x2 rails for the top and the bottom of all of the sides and the support beams. So 2x4s, we're going to cut them in half. Just rip them in half on the table saw. They're 3.5 inches. Set my table saw to center at 1 3/4. We'll run each 2x4 through. They're long, so I'll get a helper for the outfeed. And we'll just run those, and then we will start attaching them to our sides and getting those all put together. Okay, I've got all of my 2x4s ripped in half. Did a number on my poor small table saw. But so these are the sides of the bed, 8 foot long, and the ends will have the 4x4 feet attached to them. So when we need to trim these 2x2s so that they're 3.5 inches in, so that they'll fit around the 4x4s of the ends. So I'm going to take 7 inches off of this 8-foot piece and line it up so it has a 3.5 inch gap on each end. And then I'm going to go on the rough side of the particle board because I want the smooth side on the outside. Run a bead of glue and screw these babies in. So I'm going to cut my 4x4s now before I actually attach those 2x2s so that I can use them as a guide. So I'm going to cut them at 11.5 inches. My ends are 12, but I want the top layer to be able to set down inside the sides and end, and that'll help when I do my barnwood layer on top of it. So at 11.5, that allows the plywood to sit down and it'll be flush with the top of the sides. So we'll cut those at 11.5, and we'll just cut a bunch of them because we need them for our supports and also for our corners. So I will do that now. Alright, my sides are done. I gave it the space on top, that 1/2 inch. Now we're going to go ahead and do the ends, and this time we'll attach the 4x4s permanently. For these ones I just clamped it for a guide. Alright, I've finished my end pieces. So now if you recall, during the intro, we talked a little bit about the drawers and how we're going to do the supports. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to put my 4x4s on opposite ends of each one. That way I can have a slide out here and up here, so at opposing corners without a 4x4 in the way. And it doesn't matter what side my rail's on, but I'll also do those on opposing. So I'll probably do the lower one on the inside and the upper one on the outside. But I have to put an extra piece to attach the rails to anyway, so it doesn't actually matter what side because they're going to be above and below my drawer, if that makes sense. You see it as it comes together. So I need to take the particle board that I'd already ripped to 12 inches and rip it down to 11 3/4 so that the top pieces will sit inside just like I've been doing for everything else. So I'm going to rip those down, and then I will start attaching 4x4s to opposite ends. Alright, my frame is done. I laid the 1/2 of the top down. So you can see how it fits. The other half will go on the other side. All my supports. So now I can start working on the facing with the barnwood. So next we'll start ripping the barnwood all to 2 inches, and we'll go from there. Alright, I have a whole stack of barnwood ripped into 2-inch slots, and I'm going to start cutting them to put on my sides and back. I'm going to do a herringbone pattern, so I'll cut 45s and just start filling it in. I will glue each piece and then just tack it on with some finish nails and go all the way across. Do my big triangles first, and then the smaller and the smaller until it's all filled in, and do that for all 4 sides. It's going to take a lot of barnwood, but I've got a huge stack. So we'll get started with that. Alright, I almost have half done. I just got one more piece there, and then we start on the other half. Alright, we've got one side done, and then we'll move on and do the bottom end and the other side. It's pretty tedious, but once you get the first ones done, then it's pretty easy to just line them up, mark it, and cut. So I finished both sides in the front. So now I have the top here, and I've measured the box spring so that I know exactly how far in I can take my layer of barnwood so that the mattress will inset. I'm creating a little barrier for the mattress to inset, and then also it needs to go past the edge so it covers the top edge of the sides and front. So it's got to go 1.25 inches. The barnwood's going to go extend 1.25 inches. So if you remember, we made it so that the top lies flat inside around the base, so that top barnwood will be able to just extend out on top of the sides and front and back, or just the sides and front. So we'll start cutting that. I'm not going to do the chevron pattern for this. That's a little much. These will just be straight. So I've got to cut the pieces, trim them to size, and then I'm also going to do a border. So these aren't the pieces, but for example, we'll have a border all the way around, and then the pieces will be going perpendicular to that border. So the framing around the edges of the top here, I would recommend doing at least 3 inches. I'm doing 2 because I have leftover from the sides when I was doing the chevron pattern. So I'm just trying to maximize my wood. It just makes it a little bit difficult. So basically I need a lip of 1 1/4. So I only have a 1/2 inch left. So I marked my 1/2 inch and put my straight edge here to help me lay it down. And then basically I'm going to line this up so that as soon as my angled hits the corner, I'm going to glue the whole thing, clamp it down, and then nail it. And then later at the end, I come in from the underside with a couple of screws. This kind of adds a little extra. So I'm going to go ahead and glue and nail, and that will start with the frame and go from there. Next step is to cut the slats. So remember to cut your end piece to square it off first, and I've measured it out with my fence, and it's about 16 7/8, and I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those, and this is the wider stock that I've ripped. Came out to about 6 3/16. It depends on the wood you've got. So I'll just cut those all at a uniform length or square. So now that they're cut, I'll lay them out, glue, and then nail them down. Do that all the way across. My end piece here, because of the length that I had of my 2-inch, I'm actually going to do, it'll be a thinner piece with a little jut out on there, and that's where it matches to the other piece that has the same pattern, so they'll go together well. I'll show you that when I finish it. Okay, you can see what I was talking about there. So now I'm going to take my skill saw with my Craig fence jig so that it matches up with the other piece exactly. Set the blade so that it only goes as far as your barnwood and doesn't cut into your plywood. And the fence will be used to trim down the edges so that it's the exact same length as my other side. So now we're going to line the side with our frame. So it's the same thing. We'll glue, clamp, nail, and go all the way down so that it's framed all the way down the side. You can't see it very well, but I've turned it around and put in some screws just to reinforce that lip all the way around. And then I'm going to put a 2x2 brace about right here. Put one on the other side as well, but I'm going to screw that down, and that'll act as a support. There'll be a 4x4 that goes underneath that so that this end bench seat doesn't dip and bow when you sit on it. Provide some support underneath. Alright, the top is finished on one side. Now I've got to do the other. So you can see here I've got the frame going all the way around with a lip of 1 1/4 like I talked about, and then I've got my pieces going perpendicular to the frame. And then at the top, I have more room because I want it to be like a bench. And again, the frame is at a 45 up at the top corner. And the pieces are perpendicular. And then down at the bottom, that'll go up against the wall, and if you want to do a headboard, so you don't need to frame in the mattress on that side. So now I just need to do the same thing for the other half of the top, and it will be ready to go. Now I'm going to cut out the drawer slides. So again, using my Craig fence jig and my crosscut saw, I just plunge cut the lines that I've marked on my board. So marked them with chalk, and then just very carefully plunge cut it, and then when I get all my sides plunge cut, I'll use a jigsaw to finish off the rounded edge from the saw blade. And I also did two plunges. I did one at a shorter depth and then the second one at the full depth. Alright, that worked very well. So before I put the rails on for the drawers, I'm going to put the whole frame together so that I make sure I get all the measurements right. So I just drilled holes, ran some 3/8 carriage bolts, from the sides into the front and back. Did that all the way around. Make sure it's square as you put it together. And then I'm also going to use some L brackets to attach all of the interior support pieces. So as I was building the drawer, I realized that by building the drawer I'm losing space because it has to be elevated. So I'm losing a lot of vertical space, and then it also kind of closes off the whole back of the cubby. So instead I decided to just keep the door can open it. I put a stop block in opposite corners so that it doesn't fall through. And then you can put a knob on that as well if you want, if it's difficult to get out. But that way now I have access to that whole space instead of just from the drawer. And it was a lot easier to do. Alright, the bed is finished. So if you want to put a headboard on it, you can. It's up to you. You could also edge all the way around so it's not against the wall, and then you wouldn't put a headboard. But either way, it's your choice. And then you can finish it, so you can sand it down and finish it if you want, or if you want the old wood look, you can go with that and just kind of file off and file around the edges so that it's not ripping or tearing at your mattress. Just however you want to do it. I think we're going to try it plain for now, and then if we don't like it, we'll go ahead and sand and finish it. But that's our platform bed lined with barn wood. I hope you enjoyed this project. Check out my other videos on my YouTube channel, and I hope to see you again on the Green Workbench. Thanks for watching.